As the fighting intensified, though, it became more apparent that um, more activism and more people were just needed on this. So I went through two. I actually found people who had, two women who had went through the struggle themselves, who are a part of this, and eventually women were pretty much conscripted, and it wasn't really an official conscription. It was just they were conscripted to service. One of them was she went by the name of Aurea, not to give her family name away. Her upbringing was a very traditional Algerian upbringing, and she pretty much got into fighting because of the fact that she was her family was very involved in the revolution, and she was able to become like a spy and someone who actually brought currency and things to to tell the police, like messenger spies and all things like that. Well, because of that, she became so good, adept at it, that they said, "Hey, come along with us." And so she was used. She was used a lot for on the battlefield support and for running through and spies. And she speaks a lot about the hardships that were seen because of the French brutality towards the resistance. Her tale tells a very stark contrast to the way that women were living at the time in the traditional society. She was seen as someone who could dress in the Western fashions, who could, who was amongst the company of men. So she was very free and had a very male-like role in the army and the resistance. Now, as the war raged on, she saw a little bit of a backlash against it. Most of the time, because of the fact that the main enemy was the French, and there was no need to really put restrictions because she was being a very helpful member to the cause. Now, at the same time, the war was raging on. It was becoming a big sore in France, kind of like if you want to equate it to what we had in Vietnam here in America, where it became a very unpopular war because France was pretty much still trying to rebuild after the what happened during World War II. So, because of this, the French were trying to rally around this cause to save their Fourth Republic, and because of that, the French started to really up their killing of prisoners, things that just torture, going into rural houses and torturing women and children and things like that. Just real nasty things that, because of the recent effects of the Holocaust finally coming out, the international community were outraged, and so these women's voices of who were being tortured and who are part of the resistance became ever present and became something that the international community depended on to make sure that their voices got heard and to fight against. That's where I come to my second. The second account that I spoke of is an actual woman who went by the name Farida for the account, who was born in the south of France as an Algerian settler there, because they often imported Algerian labor for families who would want to support their family back home, or just because it was cheap labor essentially. And she had many tales of the treatment that she saw firsthand while she was fighting, and how enraged her family and things to that nature. There's three martyrs for the cause. Well, not really martyrs, but not officially martyrs. But there's three people. There's three women who especially stand out because of their actual role in what's being called and what was called being a fidiyat, which is someone who was a bomb placer, who actually got into the fighting. They were the three Daljima, sorry for the pronunciation. That was Dajamila Bored, Boumaza, and Boupasha. And they were they were the three, they're known for being bomb placers. And where was the one? And Moudjahidate was actually the first Algerian woman to be sentenced to death by the French because of her actions as in these bomb attacks against French targets. And Djamia Bouzma drew fame from the massive amount of torture she actually received from the French. And that just reflects what I was mentioning is about the nature of women having to stand up and be a voice in the national community saying that the French are committing atrocities against us. Which, because of this torture and the mounting pressure from military forces, the French were pushed back into the city of Algiers in 1958, which is pretty much the apex of the revolution, which showed an apex of women's involvement as well too, because on the 13th of May in 1958, as a sign of protest, women came out into the Forum Square in Algiers and actually took their veils off as a sign of protest to say that they were standing up for what they believed in. Because often the French would scar women in the face as a sign that they were being oppressive, essentially saying you're resisting our rule, so we will scar your women. This sign kind of is almost like a ceremonial up yours kind of thing that really hit home. And because of the constant turmoil, because of the Algerian Revolution, the Fourth French Republic folded shortly after. And after that, the war continued to rage on but it became pretty much was the Algerians had pretty much reached over the top, pretty much at that moment when the women finally availed themselves to say, hey, we're standing up to you. And in 1962, Charles de Gaulle, with the help of the Algerian resistance, signed the Evian Accords to end the conflict, making Algeria free. Without the contributions of women standing up to for what they believe in and going outside the home, which is against everything that their culture had done in the past, except for that one example, it would not have been possible. And even through the after effects, where the traditional culture started to take hold, especially because the nature of the rebellion was a very traditionalist rebellion based upon the fundamentals of the Islamic religion, they still were able to gain some measure of things because of the fact of some freedoms outside the home, especially because of the fact that Algeria needed to be rebuilt, and they need to actually have women to help out with the rebuilding process. So, as much as the traditional society wanted to fight back against the forces of change, the women's bravery and courage to fight outside the home pretty much made sure that change happened to further the culture in a healthy way to allow them to be free. And that's where you can see how the examples of these women who fought bravely showed that cultural change needs to take the shape of how their environment does it and how their environment is. And by doing that, you force change for the good. So, otherwise that's all I have.